Thank you for that reminder. Okay, so this is a continuation of our meeting from last week. We really appreciate all the committee members coming back today and providing your feedback. And we, of course, want to thank the community representatives in audience today. However, as this is a continuation of last week's agenda, therefore, we will not have an open forum. I think I should just call the meeting to order before I make those announcements. So why don't we do that, Debbie? So now I call the meeting to order. Perhaps Debbie can help us with the roll call, and I will come back and repeat my announcement. My apologies.
Thank you, Chairperson. Committee Member Alexy. Committee Member Bhatia. Committee Member Burnham.
Here.
Committee Member Chiong.
Here.
Committee Member Halvorsen. Committee Member Kent.
Here.
Committee Member Kingsbury.
Here.
Committee Member Laudone. Committee Member Peete. Committee Member Revuelta.
Here.
Committee Member Strout.
Here.
Vice Chair Troupe-Masi.
Present.
And Chairperson Shang.
Here. Thank you so much, Debbie. So my apologies. Let me just forgive me for the repetition. As this is a continuation from last week's agenda item, there will not be open forum, and we have one agenda item 4.2 that we will continue, and because again this is a continued item, we have heard some public comments. Thank you very much for to those who came last week, and please continue to send in your input as always. And we're gonna turn over to Andy to continue on our agenda item 4.2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Whoa. Thank you very much, Chairperson Shang, and good evening, General Plan Advisory Committee members. That's correct. We were picking up where we left off, but just to remind us where we did leave off is we were going through each of the focus areas. We were reviewing your direction to staff and confirming whether or not the changed alternative maps, focus area maps, aligned with that direction. And if there was any changes to be made, the committee would discuss that and make a motion to make those changes. So we made it through the Vasco Row focus area. So for instance, we made these changes at our last meeting, and we'll move on to the next focus area. If that's all right with you, Chairperson Shang.
I'm sorry. So I'm sorry, my internet wasn't working. I got access denied.
So we finished the Vasco Row focus area. So the next focus area up on the list would be the east of Greenville focus area. And so we will start there, and then we will proceed through the remaining focus areas this evening.
So East Greenville and do you have any preferred follow-on? Because kind of it's good to pair this with, say, Midtown after this.
So again, we were going through each of the focus areas, and we were reviewing GPAC's direction to staff, and then looking at the maps to make sure that those maps reflected that direction, and then taking any additional feedback from the committee on each of those maps.
Okay, so we'll go over the sequence later.
So again, these were the three alternatives the committee reviewed, and then the direction over the course of our marathon meetings was to start with alternative A for the East of Greenville focus area. Do not include a sports park, as was shown in alternative C. Keep the research campus from alternative A, and add mixed industrial office, and that staff would make a recommendation on the relative proportions of that. So as a reminder, the previous alternative had a general industrial place type. This has both the general industrial plus a mixed industrial office place type. And then lastly, to make sure that the open space is contiguous northward towards Laughlin Road focus area for a wildlife connection. So that was the direction given by the committee.
Okay. Showtime.
Can I just ask who this letter is from?
Apologies, yes. These comments are from committee member Halvorsen, and again, unfortunately, he's unable to be here tonight, but he wanted to share his remarks.
Thank you.
Before we dive in, clarifying question, and you've told us this before, but could you clarify what happens next relative to our feedback on the focus areas? Once we approve communally, collectively, what are the next steps? Would you just remind me relative to the information that we've been talking about for a while?
Sure, so we would then reassemble, make any changes, additional changes or final modifications to the focus area maps and bring that back to you as one citywide alternative. Procedurally, we will need to go to Planning Commission and City Council. Procedurally, we'll need to go back to Planning Commission and City Council to share with them the direction of the committee, get their feedback and their direction moving forward.
Okay. And then just take it one step further. You take it to the Planning Commission and they're in favor of it. What happens after that? And the point is like I think some of us are going to be. This East Greenville is going to be a conversation, okay? And we'll get there. But what follows that approval from Planning Commission?
So, based on what the GPAC decides, and we present that and all the work to date to Planning Commission, Planning Commission themselves will make feedback and recommendations to Council.
Okay.
And then Council will then take all that information under consideration before directing staff to do a variety of things, move forward with it, make modifications, revisit certain elements, what have you. That information then comes back to the committee. So it's a feedback loop.
Okay.
And the Planning Commission may agree with everything that GPAC has done, or they may make some alternate suggestions themselves. The City Council will hear all of that and take that feedback into account.
Okay.
Just as a reference point, we did something similar when the committee was originally designing the different alternatives for each focus area. There was a lot of work that went into that about a year ago, maybe a little longer at this point. That work then was presented to the Planning Commission. They in turn reviewed your work, made some of their own recommendations, and then that whole package went up to City Council. And then we came back to what we have today.
I was just going to say, on topic of what is presented in front of us, I think in terms of the direction that was given and then what is presented, I would say it's pretty on point to what the direction given. I don't know how much actual conversation we need to have about the moving around, but it looks pretty square to me.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions about it. And I agree that it looks similar, but I want to clarify in my own mind the general industrial. And as we discussed, the topography there does not allow as concentrated a development. And so I can certainly see why the FAR would be lower, but it's also a different type of activity. Now, what's out there now, there's a what do you call it? All the vegetation, the trees and all that sort of stuff that converted into other materials and stuff like that. It's sort of an industrial process, but you might call it an agriculture. And so I'm sort of wondering what all fits under the definition of general industrial compared to what it is now.
So we can work on pulling up the actual place type menu, which describes that, but it's the broadest possible collection of uses in general industrial, an industrial use type. So Think about, like warehouse uses, distribution uses, but also manufacturing. You could see any number of different types of uses go into that place type. In the general industrial, you might have some, supportive office space, usually a relatively small percentage of the overall footprint. Contrast that with the mixed industrial office, which is a subset of the broader general industrial collection of uses that are more focused on job dense types of uses, R&D, manufacturing, things like that.
You would also see things like open air storage yards and those types of facilities in the general industrial as compared to the mixed industrial office.
Yeah, the courtyards and stuff that actually are sprinkled around various places. I guess my concern, based on what you said, is warehousing. It's a terrible place for warehousing for a whole number of reasons. Plus, it's not really, I don't think it's where the city wants to go. So I'm wondering if that definition of what fits there should somehow exclude warehousing. And I don't know exactly how to do that.
So part of the process, and this goes back to the vice chair's question, is we're talking about place types now. They're pretty broad definitions. Eventually, we will come back and this map will again evolve slightly to fit those place types into designations, land use designations, and or refine those definitions, what that designation is, to be descriptive about what uses are included. So we will have another chance to talk about how broad or narrow each of these land uses could be.
The way you would do it is through zoning. I just wanted to add that when you actually created the designation, you would have a collection of uses that are permissible through a conditional use permit, not permissible at all. That's how you would do it.
And this is, kind of clarifying my own question. Assuming that we collectively agreed on that tonight, both Planning Commission, City Council also agreed that they wanted to continue investigating East of Greenville, and it ultimately came back to us, right? Like there's a world where we could say, yes, that looks like what we talked about, two other sets of eyes, look at it, and like, there's a world in this feedback loop where we may say yes to this today and it doesn't come back to us? Is that a possibility? Based on Planning Commission feedback and City Council feedback?
It is a possibility. You have two alternatives for this area. You have a with East of Greenville and a without East of Greenville right now that the committee's been talking about. So that could go to Planning Commission and Council, and they could ultimately decide we're not going to move forward with East of Greenville at this time. Is it going to be a future study, or we're not going to do it at all? So, there is a scenario where that's possible.
I agree with Committee Member Strout. I think this is a faithful representation of what GPAC talked about. But there were also a lot of unknowns and a lot of questions that have yet to be answered. And I'll get to my bottom line is I don't think, at least from my perspective, GPAC's ready to make a recommendation to go forward with A or B, the no build option or the build option, until we have a lot of different questions answered. And the first would start with the environmental impact report. And, Greenville roads had a lot of improvements since the time I've been here, when there were no lights and the Ace train overpass was kind of a disaster. But the intersection at 580, the ingress egress is still kind of a mess. It's an axle breaker. So I really need to see what's inside the EIR before I could ever vote on one way or the other. And we're still waiting. Tri-Valley Conservancy is doing an inventory, an extensive analysis on what the conservation values of the land. I think we've reached consensus that we would like to see a green belt around the eastern edge of Livermore as we have around the southern edge. The question is, we saw some soil types. It's all wasteland now. I think we know it. It's never been agriculture. It won't be agriculture unless we bring water. Bringing water costs money, but that could be one of the community benefits of doing this is ending up with a green belt that would actually be green and could actually support farming as well as grazing. Where the greenbelt goes, I think, is still an open question. We've heard from the community they'd like it to keep running down Greenville Avenue, which isn't great for planning because you typically don't have well-improved streets with development only on one side. There's others who want it on the other side of the canal, on the eastern edge of the canal. We still need to define, you're only showing part of it. We're not showing the BART lands. The BART lands are slated for development. Lots of them are inside the urban growth boundary. That will be a battle royale with the environmental community because those lands are highly sensitive. There's no way they should be developed. They should be removed from inside the urban growth boundary and placed outside of it. And then we've got the wildlife corridor. The Ag Advisory Committee is pressuring for both a wildlife corridor and a trail connection. I know the city is in negotiation to buy the two most critical parcels, which would allow critters and humans to actually move under 580. That needs to be shown. It needs to be discussed. We have to see the north part of the greenbelt as well as the south part. And then what the rationale is based on topography, soils, ingress, egress. I think the greenbelt in the northern part makes sense because those were parcels that were basically segmented by the canal. The canal runs where it runs because the topography dictates it. It goes in the lowest point because water doesn't flow well uphill. But it doesn't show how it connects back to a greenbelt past, I guess that's Patterson Pass Road, the new one. Exactly how do we connect into the South Livermore Valley area needs to be determined. The TVC report will show us what the conservation values of the habitat is. They focus on habitat because if you have habitat that will support kit fox and red-legged frogs and salamanders, then you can end up with those. If you don't have the proper habitat, those animals will disappear. We're still waiting on some more discussion about job housing match. Benchmarks, it would be very helpful. Last meeting we talked about Palo Alto as a total mismatch with 3 jobs for every home. I think some of these bedroom communities like Danville could be just the opposite. 3 homes for every job, maybe 30 homes for every job. We need to see what the benchmarks are, and are there cities like San Luis Obispo in California that would be a good model for Livermore, where we would actually be able to be a self-sufficient city, where people could both live and work here. And there's so many questions about those jobs. What does an average Livermore job pay now? We know it doesn't pay well enough to afford a house in Livermore. There's the lucky few, and we've heard a lot from the lucky few who bought houses 50, 60 years ago when they were $17,000 each. Well, that same house is $1.7 million now. The jobs haven't kept up in terms of the ability, and I think the committee's been consistent for the past 2 years that the approach to affordable housing is to build more affordable housing and to attract more jobs that can actually afford the housing that we build. And so it's 2 sides of the same coin that we have to address, but we've not received the information we need about where we were 20 years ago. We know our match has deteriorated by 50%, but what is a realistic number to go forward? What have other cities done, and where we go? We've also heard from the community that they believe there's inventory out there to build light industrial, to attract good employers with high-paying jobs to Livermore, to allow the good employers to expand. Staff has repeatedly said that this inventory doesn't really exist. We're down to essentially seeds and stems, which is parcels that have problems with ingress, egress, topography, ground pollution. They haven't been developed for a reason, not for the demand, but because the inventory is really unusable. Others say that there's enormous amounts of inventory. The city, we're building off the old general plan, The old general plan said build the light industrial parks east of the city. And as the city has grown, east has started moving, and neighborhoods like Brisa have developed in what used to be east, but now that's kind of midtown. And the airport appears built out. I saw a presentation today from Peete Santiu about their plans at the airport, and you're looking down at the visualization, and you say, well, there's Gillig, but where's the land over there to attract another Gillig? It doesn't appear to be there, but I think we need a parcel by parcel analysis of what is the usable inventory, so we can, understand what the task ahead of us is for. And I think when we put all that together, the EIR, the Tri-Valley Conservancy's habitat analysis with topography and other things, and then we got to start looking at the funding sources. I mean, what level of development do we need to get the output we need? You're not going to turnout of the canal is $2 million, and then you've got to buy water rights. So where will there's in my view, there's going to have to be some development in the right portions of east of development if we want to actually build a green belt and be able to actually make it green and have water to actually create farmland out of what is currently wasteland. And so those are all the issues. I think they've come up, time and time again at the meetings. I know it takes time to do EIRs. I know it takes time for the Tri-Valley Conservancy to hire the biologists and do the work. But I think we have time, because this is not part of our RENA numbers. There's no housing here. There shouldn't. If there's housing, it'll be farm worker housing, and that's a whole different issue. I think that the staff can continue building the general plan, and I think the unresolved chapter is going to be economic development. And we either change the current one, which is we're going to maintain an inventory of light industrial land to attract new employers and allow current employers to expand, or we change that chapter, which could be the last chapter we write in the general plan, just say, look, we're closed for business. We're now moving towards a bedroom community. We have some jobs and cherish them, but in the end, eventually we're going to infill develop the area, which we should be doing. That's what protects the farmland. But so I don't see the rush. I don't see the rush tonight to make a decision on with or without Greenville. I think we need more study, and it doesn't impact Midtown at all. Midtown is housing. We've already made the moves to preserve most of the light industrial, the small business serving industrial areas, the fringe areas around Midtown. We're really just talking about the transit center. And there too, I appreciate Paul's position. I think he's the only committee member who's opposed to Valley Link. But there are people in the community who oppose Valley Link. But the city council has already taken a position in favor of Valley Link. So this committee has to work within the parameters of the decisions already made. And Valley Link is something that Livermore supports, and we have to plan a transit community about it. So I would, I'd like to hear from the other committee members, but I think shortly thereafter I'd like to make a move that we just table east of Greenville and focus on Midtown, which is the most important determinant in the next 20 years of what Livermore is going to look like, what the character of Livermore is going to look like, and how we can answer and address our housing crisis in this cycle and the next 2 cycles of RENA. Sorry for the length of the comments, but it's been building up over several meetings, because we keep asking for things and we're not seeing them.
And how do you follow that comment from David? Of course, when it comes to the agricultural aspect of it, the open space part of it, I will defer to David all day long because of who he is and the industry that he's in. Prior to you making that comment, my thinking is, and my question is the east of Greenville, has this always been, or is this part of the city's intent eventually to to incorporate within the city because of, it's already within the sphere of influence, and we know that not everything that's happening in this, in all these parcels are, part of what these parcels are supposed to be doing. So with all due respect to all the public comments about moving, not moving the UGB, and maybe it's beyond the purview of the GPAC, but I would think that it's important for Livermore to get this east of Greenville, whether or not we build on it or keep it an open space. But I think just what we can do with it, and just keeping it within the what we need in the city of Livermore, because obviously Alameda County is not really showing interest in doing the job it's supposed to do. So, I mean, after that I kind of lost my train of thought, but no, but I think it's important to just the balance is very difficult. I've said this many meetings ago about when the fusion was first discovered in the lab, is that I would like to see in the future, the long-term future of Livermore is to keep industry. That is important to Livermore, and we take pride in that discovery. I think we should harness whatever businesses would come out of it, and if you don't have that facility or space to enhance all these discoveries and incubation, and this is what we have, we should really think about doing this in the long term.
I want to give whoever hasn't had a chance to speak a chance. No?
I've already spoken.
Would you mind just sliding your answer if you would like to speak? Just slide if when you're ready to speak. Oh, I see it here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thanks for the comments, David. I think they're pretty well thought out. I have a more kind of focused.
Alan, you might turn your
Here, you go ahead.
Usually we're fine.
Okay. Might have a more focused view of things, and that is the east of Greenville area's justification is a job based, basically. Here's a place to add jobs. The reason for adding the jobs would be because we have more population. And the only way to get more population is to improve the housing stock. And so to me, I think this is a little bit putting the cart before the horse. I think focusing on the Midtown and other areas to increase housing first, and seeing where that goes and where that develops, and then giving a pause like you're suggesting, David, and then assessing, okay, is the population coming to the point where we need the jobs? And I think the committee's time might be better spent on the housing side of the coin. This is about jobs, fine, but the data is saying, for example, the forecast in the plan as presented right now has a 50% growth in population. And then it said, okay, well, therefore, if we have 50% growth in population, we need commensurate growth in jobs to reach a number. Well, I question the 50%. I just don't really believe it. And I think if you take that number back, then you can say we can pause on most of the jobs in here. And there's no way we're going to get any type of growth in population without improving the housing stock. So that's my view.
And just to kind of go off what you said, we kind of have to have a goal in terms of what we want our jobs to population ratio, your housing to be, to see what we're shooting for, based just on the data we have about the population or what projections we have. So it is kind of a difficult thing to think about right now without really knowing what that's going to look like or what we're shooting for in terms of what that ratio should be.
I agree that we don't have enough information to make a decision now about east of Greenville. And some of my thoughts are similar to David's, but I'll add some more. The thought was that we can get water to turn this into agriculture, and that's one possibility. The other possibility is that it's left in the county and it becomes just this massive industrial junkyard where people lay things down. That seems to be another possibility. And the third is it's developed. But I would bring up the point that California has perhaps 2 million acres of farmland that is in production because of unsustainable use of groundwater. And it's going to cut back. So the idea that we're short of farmland in California is actually not really true. What the amount of cultivatable land is actually going to be limited by water. And so in the next few years, we'll find out whether or not the people of the state of California actually want to improve the water system to even maintain a larger fraction of what's already in production. Some of it should probably be taken out regardless. And the reason I bring this up is because of, okay, you spend $2 million for turnout, and then you have to buy water rights. What is the water right going to cost? Is it $250 per acre foot? Is it $1,000 an acre foot? Because you're talking about, a bank's not going to loan money to an agricultural operation. They'll say, well, I can put my stuff in and maybe I'll have water in some years, and maybe I won't have water in other years. It's just not a good plan, and I think TVC has the ability to take a look at that issue to find out how viable agriculture is in this area. Now, at the City Council, I spoke in favor of doing an EIR, but I was not in favor of what they were going to do an EIR was, because it was an EIR on a massive shopping center area out there, which is just, it makes no sense in any universe as near as I can tell. This one would actually make sense to study. As David mentioned, if you start with this and say, okay, where are the sensitive environmental areas? How might you want to configure that? And that will actually give you information which is actually useful towards making decisions in the future. I'm not sure that the EIR that was approved by the City Council actually will give useful information. And I don't know if it's possible to change that or how far along they are. I made the statement at the time. I thought that they should look at one with lower commercial amount of area. And so if you take these various things together and it comes back in a year or so, I think there could be a lot more intelligent discussion of the options. I'm not opposed to this in principle. I don't believe that as soon as you vote to expand the urban growth boundary in one area that the entire valley is going to be developed. I think that's a terrible argument. However, it is going to go in front of the voters. And if it's not well thought out and compelling, it's going to lose. And therefore you will have wasted a lot of money trying to get voter approval on something that's half-baked. We shouldn't be there. That's just not a good idea.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So right now all we're doing is saying this slide matches with what we did. Later in the evening we'll be deciding between including it or not when we go to council, right? We're not making that decision this moment.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
right now the exercise before us is, does the map match the direction given? I guess the committee
So I
already-
think a lot of the conversation we just had might be, we can revisit it later if there are more thoughts on it instead of,
The other
At
part,
some point, we'll have to make a decision though.
yeah.
And we've been asking for data, and we need to have the data to make an informed decision.
So at this point, we don't have to make a recommendation tonight. And so I've heard a couple items thrown on the table. One, twice, that the map reflects the direction. The other items thrown on the table are, this is a list of data requests we have for the project team. And those include the results of the EIR, what the conservation values might be, jobs, employment, wages, and inventory of existing commercial industrial lands, and some sort of parcel by parcel analysis of that. So it seems like there's a motion embedded in there somewhere that A, this works, this reflects the direction, and B, the committee would like some additional analysis done.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna lean to my assistant city manager who just grabbed the mic.
Well, and just to clarify, you don't have to make a decision tonight about whether to include East of Greenville or not. You can continue to send both of them forward, or you can have a recommendation that says this one needs more study. It really is up to the committee what you think you'd like to do. Ultimately, though, we do here in the relatively near future need to begin to shift some of the policy analysis and other things. If you give us direction, we can certainly go back and do quite a bit of research in the background. But to keep on, or to try to catch up with our schedule, we do need to do some shift around to all the other chapters of the general plan. So
Yeah, understood. Brandon?
Yeah, just to sort of further refine that point, part of the reason we need to go back to Planning Commission and Council has just been a very long time since they've seen any iteration of these maps, and you've made significant changes to them. There's no more Las Positas focus area, Midtown significantly truncated, Laughlin significantly truncated. So in the normal course of our business, it's time for us to go back and forth and then say, here's what the GPAC has been up to. So we don't need to make that decision tonight about yes, East of Greenville, no East of Greenville. What we really need is to get to, is the map consistent with the direction? And then we can take the next steps.
Understood. So let me just summarize. At this point, yes, they are very important decisions ultimately that hopefully we will, I know there's a motion possibly, but we will either choose scenario A or scenario B or neither, or send back with additional guidance. But that, perhaps just wait on that. At this point, let's spend a couple more minutes to really look at the placement types, whether the placement types reflects what we discussed. And if I may, there was a question earlier as far as how the placement types imply feasibility of job creation, housing creation, etc. And may I just add that yes, we do need to examine the place types, but I'm very curious in terms of your estimates of jobs. We're talking about 22,000 jobs from these place types. And our recommendation, as I recall, was to really add mixed industrial, and I think we had some notion of not having too many warehouses. And so, and we also had very early on requests to really provide some benchmarking of our, really the scale between 0.98 without Greenville from current 1.11 to possibly with Greenville 1.29. We had asked for some sort of a validation, and I know you mentioned some, benchmarking, but that's linked that to the feasibility, and then we would. I know there's a lot of latitude given to the project team as far as how much mixed industrial was added, and I really I want to thank you for giving us your best, recommendations. I just don't know how to gauge whether the two blocks of mauve, is that the color, really translate to what you're recommending in terms of job growth and quality jobs. So you got the mixed industrial below.
This is the general industrial, and then this color here north of Patterson and south of Patterson is that mixed industrial office.
Right, so could you elaborate your thoughts on those? Because that's basically your latitude, your recommendation.
Right. So are you asking for our thoughts on the mix of jobs, like density, quality, things like that? Sure. So I have the place types menu in front of me, so I can go through it very quickly and just say that the general industrial, so the northern portion of that, includes manufacturing, warehousing, R&D, recycling facilities, and heavy industry that uses, stores, or processes raw materials. That's the general industrial. The mixed industrial office includes office, research and development, and high-tech processing uses such as life science, but not heavy industrial uses such as traditional manufacturing. The FAR on the industrial office is 0.5 to 2, so you'll see a higher intensity of development if that gets built to that place type standard. 0.6 is the FAR on the general industrial, so you'll typically see that. That means you're getting 60% coverage of any given lot. You got a 10-acre lot, you'll have 6 acres of that be building, and the rest of it is going to be parking and other, perhaps contractor, the outside storage or something like it. So in general, the industrial office product is the kind of thing you would see at Form Factor, Lamb Research, Topcon, or if you looked over in surrounding cities, you might see life sciences manufacturing types of operations, think 10x Genomics, things like that. Zeiss and their manufacturing operation in Dublin. So you tend to have a higher job density in those areas. You still could see significant floor area dedicated to manufacturing, particularly in like pilot line manufacturing, prototyping, things like that. And the job quality, using quality as a proxy for salary, for wage, on average will likely be higher because you'll have higher educational attainment levels and skill levels across the entire operation. So you'll have more engineers, more highly trained people working in manufacturing, as well as business support operations and things like that. Is that what you were looking for?
A little bit more than that.
Okay.
I think that was printed. Sorry, I found it was printed, so that was helpful. Thank you. But the question then is feasibility of creating 22,000 jobs in this combination. Can you cover the sort of how you study that, how you came to the 22,000, how much of that is high quality, high paying job?
Sure. So I wouldn't want to comment on exactly what percentage of those jobs fall into the industrial office or general industrial. We can consult with EPS and see how they actually ran the numbers. Remember though that those job numbers are capacity-based numbers. So if all of this built out, that's how many jobs you would be likely to see, or at least to a first approximation. That doesn't mean that that's exactly how many you will see at any given point in time. So all of the numbers in front of you are assuming full build out of that place type. So they're showing you what they're all kind of maximum numbers when you look at that.
And again, let me come back to the key word, the feasibility.
Sure.
And I really am not an expert, so I'm a pretty good representative of the community.
Sure.
So given if just the fact that you need investors to come in similar to someone like I don't know, federal governments or private sectors to create these quality jobs, can you share how what kind of feasibility you can attract these high-paying employers?
Sure. The easiest sort of feasibility test is, do we already have employers like that in the community? And so for some of them we do. For example, the semiconductor industry, even Gillig may want to go into something more like a mixed industrial office if they were looking for space today. They need a lot of manufacturing floor space, but they're not doing logistics and e-commerce and that sort of thing. So from a feasibility standpoint, feasibility is based on a whole host of market conditions, but at the end of the day, it's does a developer, if they're doing a speculative development, meaning they are building it assuming that a tenant will come, they don't have a tenant in tow, or they're not building it for a particular user, do they believe that the use that they'll be able to attract will pay enough to create a profit when you subtract out all of the costs of development, entitlement, design, all of those things? So when we're looking at feasibility, it will depend a lot on what's going on in the market at that time. Interest rates, when they're higher, makes it more challenging. When anytime costs go up, your feasibility of marginal projects goes down. But it also depends a lot on demand and desirability for these kinds of uses. So it's a bit more art than science in terms of determining exact feasibility, but it's the development economics will drive whether these things are feasible. And that will include some things that the city might do, and this speaks to the policy section of what you'll all work on later when we get to things like the economic development element and other goal and policy work to do through the general plan. What are we trying to achieve, and what are the steps we can take to perhaps influence the market economics and feasibility of projects like this. But you're talking about a 20-year planning horizon, so I think even looking at feasibility, you'd only be able to capture feasibility today, and then you could make some projections based on either historical trends or going out and talking to the development community, which we do all the time. But a helpful benchmark maybe, at least as one data point, that we're proposing to bring in, the council will see it on the 25th, some land on the west side of town, south of the Oaks Business Park and south of the airport, to be annexed into the city as an industrial use. And the developer of that property already has a significant local employer signed up for over 450,000 square feet of space there. So the existing demand for that tenant space means that even before annexation, before entitlement, there's already users who are interested in that kind of space. So I think we have a lot of latent demand for this type of space. Irrespective of where it goes, you have users who want to access this kind of space. Livermore is very strong in the industrial market, even while the economy in the Bay Area has been going through some changes. Livermore's industrial market has remained very strong.
I wanted to add just one more thing for context. So the place types you have up there are very general. These are standard sorts of place types that you'll see across many communities. For the general industrial, you've got 0.3 to 0.5 FAR. 0.5 FAR means that if you have an acre, half of that acre is covered with building floor area, right? A 2.0 FAR means that for 1 acre, you've got 2 acres of floor area. So really, because you've got parking and all these other things, it's probably more like a 4-story building, right? So there's quite a bit of variation between 0.5 and 2.0 in terms of how much building floor area you have and how many jobs you might have. So our consultants picked a point in the middle to average in terms of jobs numbers for each of these types of categories. But to Brandon's point, we don't know quite what the market's going to do in the future. It's a bit of a guesstimate to know, are people going to come in on the high end of the density or the low end of the density? You know, exactly what will be attractive here 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. Yeah. But the place types you have, and Brandon went through them, I just wanted to highlight that there is some variability in the number of jobs and what might happen here. It's not an exact science.
Any other questions as far as their recommendation?
I brought up topography earlier, and I just brought up the map on my telephone here, and I don't see any topography that has a horizontal line like that. And I'm wondering, since we didn't really actually look at the satellite map when we were talking about this, whether or not something like that ought to be thought about before saying this is a plan. And I bring that up in part because of the context of that northern part. The only access there is a 2-lane railroad underpass. And if there's any significant development there, that's not going to work. So the alternative would be to come off Patterson Pass and go up along the greenbelt there. And so I'm just wondering, I understand that this is a 20-year plan in practicality, but I think there maybe could be a little bit more practical thought there.
So I'll just make a general statement that remember that new development often requires upgrading ingress, egress, and transit systems. I mean, in almost every case, when you have a scenario like this, you would see that there would be road changes to get in there. So I wouldn't look at the existing transportation network and then apply this to that transportation network and assume no changes there. So that's a general comment. I think to your last point, you may not want to get down into the level of, well, I've got to look at where the hills are and try to design around that. The use can apply to the land underneath. That doesn't make it buildable. And that's fine. That will be what the landowners have to design around in that context. So I think it's up to the committee how much you want to continue to refine, these kinds of things. But we're sort of at the colored polygon stage of you want more of this type of use, less of this type of use at this stage. These are, again, place types. They're not even land use designations at this point. There will be more evolutions as we go forward to this map when it becomes something that looks more like what you would actually have in a general plan document. But it's really up to you.
So I mean, I mean to the point that Asa made a minute ago. If we're ultimately going to come back to this, I think this represents the feedback we've provided. I'm about ready to continue to progress this conversation. What say you?
Okay, so any other comments or questions as far as the recommendation from the project team, particularly the mixed industrial, and I think, did we decide we're not changing the size of the research campus? We're not changing it. Okay, any other questions about that? So, and we reserve the discussion as far as the job resident ratio later on.
We've certainly been taking notes on some of the things that you'd like to see, and those things will take time to work on. We're not going to have answers to any of those things immediately, but we can work through some of those issues in the coming months and over the course of the year.
Okay. So do we then take a vote? Do we have any changes? No changes, then we take a vote. Any changes to this map?
No.
Okay. So do we take actual vote or raise hands? I forget what we did.
Yeah, so we'd like to have a motion and a second and a vote to endorse this as the map as is to move forward.
Okay. I would just move to endorse it.
Okay.
Second?
Second, I can second that motion to
Okay,
endorse this map.
Thank you. Committee Member Burnham?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
Thank you. Committee Member Chiong?
Aye.
Committee Member Kent?
Aye.
Committee Member Kingsbury?
Aye.
Committee Member Revuelta?
Aye.
Committee Member Strout?
Aye.
Vice Chair Troupe-Masi?
Aye.
And Chairperson Shang.
Aye. Thank you so much, Debbie.
Next focus area is Los Positas. These were the three alternatives. It was a mix of industrial and residential uses. The committee voted to not move that forward as a focus area. This is the question before you is, does the map now reflect your direction? There is no map.
I think there's just.
Maybe we don't need to vote on this one again. I think we made,
Okay.
you voted,
We
there's no
only voted
changes.
once.
Yeah.
I just want to again put on record that there's a letter put into the record, so we will have that as part of the record. We don't need to take a vote, so we can just move on.
The next focus area would be Laughlin Road. As you recall, there was three different alternatives that had a mix of housing, commercial, industrial, and mostly open space. And through the course of conversation, the GPAC provided some direction in this area, and I will attempt to read it to you. So for the small triangle at the west of the focus area, that would be this triangle we're discussing. The committee wanted to add industrial fronting I-580 as a buffer, add another buffer as a green belt, and then the residential would be medium density north of that open space buffer, add a park, or designation for a park space, and an appropriate amount of neighborhood commercial to the far west edge of the triangle. And then for the remainder of the focus area, add mixed industrial commercial in this area. And before it aligned more or less this way, the committee suggested make it run in alignment with Scenic Avenue. and maintain the existing highway commercial along 580. That's this red color here, these teardrop parcels. Designate the rest as open space, and then make sure that there is a wildlife connection from this area south under the freeway to eastern Greenville. So that was the direction the committee provided staff. And then, as you may recall from last meeting, there is an error on the map, and it's highlighted here. It's just a mapping error, so that was meant to be a purple color for general industrial. It's showing what used to be high-density residential, and with that cleanup, the housing overall reduces by 60 units, and jobs would increase by about 12.
Andy, I thought we moved the neighborhood commercial closer to the neighborhood, meaning on the other side of the development where the housing is?
So from here to here.
Yeah, or to the disputed circled area.
So we're open to that recommendation if we got it wrong, and we can make that adjustment.
That was late at night, but I kind of remembered, wasn't that the last thing we did was move the neighborhood serving commercial closer to the neighborhood?
Sorry. Yeah, I think it's reflected in the second to last bullet point, like sub-bullet point. Add an appropriate amount of neighborhood commercial to the far west edge of the small triangle.
So it's another error I guess we got wrong. We put it on the eastern edge of that triangle, so we can move that if that's the direction of the committee.
Yeah.
If you want it built, they're gonna, the grocery store is gonna want houses all around it. They're not gonna want open space.
Yeah,
Show of hands.
oh,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so to show of hands, what kind of recommendation do you need to correct that? Yeah?
Just before we move on to another topic, if that's what the committee would like to see, and I've heard two committee members saying that, if we want to move the commercial from this location to this location.
To reflect the bullet point, I mean, yeah.
Correct.
yeah. Let me see. I remember talking about it. I'm not sure if there was a firm, there wasn't a vote on it, I don't think. I was asking whether or not moving that compromised the existing shopping center on Vasco Road. And if this is a small area, maybe it's not a problem, but I just think that it's something that people should think about before they vote, put it that way.
Well, I remember having that it got late. I remember having that conversation, and while it's a little blurry, those bullet points indeed reflect what we talked about. I think in that discussion we landed that at least collectively, that's where we wanted it on the western end of that triangle.
Can the committee confirm exactly where they would like it moved to, if you do in fact want it moved, to make sure we don't end up misplacing it by accident? Yeah. Again.
I we move the neighborhood serving commercial inside the red circle.
I mean, essentially, right? I mean, like that's kind of. I can second. Give me a second. I can second that.
Just hand raises is fine, but also, what would you like to take the place of that commercial since it's moving? Just a continuation of exactly what's underneath it or near it?
I would continue the trail. I mean, my understanding is there'll be trail development in the open space to improve the access to Brushy Peak, etc. There's park district plans up there, so I would let the neighborhood continue to connect to the open space.
So essentially, continuation of all these elements: greenbelt and housing into this corner. Or were we saying make this
all green?
All green.
Oh, I don't think there's any reason to make it any wider, but it should be continuous, because right now it kind of stops in the middle of a shopping center.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
So we can connect it.
That makes sense to me.
And then just divide the uses on either side of it.
And so I would just ask, and I'm not proposing either, the other possibility is towards the west could be up along Scenic. That is surrounded more completely by housing than along the frontage road. But I don't have an opinion one way or the other.
Maybe helpful to think about the frontage road as an access way to that commercial though, because you probably don't have enough rooftops in this area to support a walkable commercial center there. So maybe the freeway visibility from that area may also help support it. So just food for thought.
And the road improvements are there. Scenic is not a very large road.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, in North Front right there that they can.
you don't want people cutting through neighborhoods to get to a grocery store. You want them driving on the main road to get to the grocery store.
Well, you don't want a grocery store. You already have a problem with supporting the current grocery store.
Oh, that's true. I mean, there's theories that we have
Whatever
different
goes in
grocery
there.
stores now, but don't tell that's a safe way.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, include such uses as dry cleaners, nail salons, grocery stores, and inline retail. So like, it's just pink. It's just pink. And that we're just saying that's where we think it's appropriate. So I can further raise my hand, like, if that's what we're looking for next.
How about the scale? The pink one is not, it's the same scale as the one that we're trying to change it to. So I would rather the extension go to the bottom, to the edge of North Front.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's approximately the same, so if we move this square, this pink square here, it would fit right there between the green belts and.
Until the North Front.
Yes,
area.
exactly.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see very well. The stripes, are they showing up there? Because I couldn't see
they're
from
just
here.
very faint.
These stripes or these stripes?
Both,
No.
both. So
Yes.
they will be,
They're both striped.
they're both stripes, so they will be,
So we got residential, medium, high
is it
density.
just like
and-
this? Can you see?
Yeah, it does not look like that. But, I mean, so it's a good question. So confirming that that is indeed residential, medium, high density recommended up there,
Correct.
and mixed use, industrial
It's the mixed commercial and industrial.
and mixed commercial.
That's the maker space.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, because it doesn't look like what's,
yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
okay.
So that's really kind of like a townhouse, townhome place type next to the single family housing behind it.
The residential medium high density is more like an apartment place type.
Okay. So how tall?
It's 30 to 59.
At 30 to 50, I would say it's probably at least 3 stories tall. 3 to 4.
Did you say that the legacy apartments downtown were 55?
About, yeah.
Now, legacy has, I mean, it's two different things, right? There's the solid block that has the Texas wrap, then there's this parking place, and then there's the stuff along there. So when you say 55, that's the entire complex?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, this is almost half the density of that. Well, I guess if you took to the upper edge.
Yeah.
This map is very blurry where my eyes are going. My eyes are definitely going, but I think it's still blurry. Okay, so it goes all the way up to 59. Okay.
And that's medium high.
Yes.
Well, that's what gets you the 4 stories like Legacy.
So I have a question, I don't think you might. Andy, can you give us the data, how many jobs and how much housing comes from this configuration?
There.
I have to look it up.
I'm looking at the priors and they're quite a bit different, so it's hard to
I see. Yeah.
estimate it.
If you give us a minute, we'll look that up, and I don't know if you have any other comments or thoughts.
Do we have any questions as far as medium high versus medium? I'm reading the third bullet. Doesn't say medium high. I'm sorry, I'm just not remembering that.
I vaguely remember that there was a discussion that it was next to single family and that there shouldn't be too high a density next to that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if it was a committee member or somebody in the audience or whatever, but I don't remember a clear decision of medium high versus medium.
Correct, I don't remember,
Yeah.
so that's just discussed. If it's okay, medium high, since we didn't capture that in the bullet, I just wanna be,
Because it was originally very high. It was dark brown there, so we actually knocked it down.
to medium high.
Yeah.
So there's a factor of 2 within, right, basically 30 to 60. And so 30 is, is certainly more compatible with the neighborhood. If the market could say they can go higher, then maybe it could, but.
So it's hard to tell what the future marketplace will be. In today's marketplace, developers would be much more likely to build at the lowest end of the density range. But that could change over time, it's hard to say.
Do we have any recommendations on density? More specifically? On the low?
I'm fine with the range because I think it will
The medium
it'll all
high.
get picked up at 30, 35, something like that.
Oh,
But in 20 years, if it doesn't get built till then, maybe people will have more appetite for higher density.
So, so would you one more time to clarify our modifications to the bullet points in the map that we just made?
Well, I think what we really need to do is simply implement the bullet points that are actually on the slide. The things that need to be changed were things that were in error and did not get reflected accurately on the map. So I think we can move forward, and the changes that we would make then would be to move the neighborhood serving commercial over to the southwest portion. That bottom triangle corner of the general industrial becomes that. We have the trail connection go all the way through, or the green belt connection go all the way through to the open space, and fill in the remaining components that were the neighborhood serving commercial with the corresponding place type that's right next to it.
And I think we would correct the slide to say medium-high density if the committee is okay.
I would prefer that, yeah, just,
Because it is confusing.
Oh, you're
We would
right.
say 59 dwelling units per acre or less, which is
yeah,
consistent with the
thank you.
designation.
I could reconcile
Right.
the number and the
Yeah, we
label.
needed medium high in there, that's right.
What if that's the committee
I'm
feels comfortable?
Yeah, I think everyone's nodding. We can move on.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so can we see that on the? Oh, we don't have.
Yeah, we don't have our project team, which normally does our consultant team, which normally does the typing.
Oh, here you
Okay, all
go.
right, Debbie's coming to the rescue.
Here you
She'll
go,
show that
Debbie.
medium high for us.
So
Bada
here's,
bing.
it's a correct map to Forest
And also neighborhood commercial moving.
So
Oh,
medium
yeah.
high and then 59.
where the 50 is.
Okay, so committee member Kingsbury, we have the table up in front of us, and what we think we're looking at here is that in this scenario, you'd have 2,136 new population. They have 856 housing units, 803 households, and 663 jobs.
Thank you.
And a lot of open space.
Okay.
So, motion to approve?
Okay, second. Debbie?
Sorry, I'm doing double duty here. Thank you for your patience. Committee member Burnham,
Yes.
committee member Chiong,
Aye.
committee member Kent,
Aye.
committee member Kingsbury,
Aye.
committee member Revuelta,
Aye.
committee member Strout,
Aye.
vice chair Troupe-Masi,
Aye.
and chairperson Shang.
Aye. Thank you so much, Debbie. Amy?
So the next focus area would be the Midtown focus area. Originally, there were 3 alternatives that covered a much wider area. And the committee recommended narrowing the focus area down to just this core area, which represents the most intense areas for change. Start with the spirit of the blended alternative, which is this one here, a mix of housing types and industrial uses. We're replace residential uses that would be fronting I-580 in that alternative with a mixed industrial office place type, and indicate on the map future school site is needed. And to clarify that, that would be a floating designation. That's not necessarily the exact location of the school, but it would be floating to indicate that there would be a school site in this focus area.
Okay.
Just because it is really blurry now that I'm looking at it. This is a solid yellow color, which is the medium density. That's 15 to 29 dwelling units per acre. This is the medium high density, which is that 30 to 59 dwelling units per acre. And this is the high density, 60 to 100 dwelling units per acre.
So how many people are in that residential high density?
Just shy of 16,000 across the entire focus area, so not just the high density, but all of the residential.
You don't have it just by that area?
I don't. I think we'd have to do some reverse engineering of the midpoint and the population demographics.
And that's, if, you know, I think Joanne said at the last meeting, she took the middle spot for these.
Right.
So that would be 80.
Right.
So that's 6 floors?
Ooh.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah.
There were 6,364 housing units.
So I was one of the few that voted against the recommendation of the city, of the committee. Because I didn't think that this density was either appropriate or practical. And I guess I would hope that the committee would consider reconsidering this to make it as medium high.
Yeah. I mean, so in our last meeting, I kind of, and I'm still kind of jumbling the numbers myself, but, you know, on one of the graphics said that we've been considering a buffer as far as housing, like a little extra fluff. And like when I first saw this map, I'm of the mind, we have, like, it doesn't look like we're gonna have any trouble meeting our arena numbers for the next couple of cycles. So if being a little more conservative on what we suggest, like I could start having that conversation, especially with this, because like 6 stories doesn't seem feasible. It's like in the realm of that brand of Livermore conversation, it's not compatible. So like, yeah, I'm, you know, curious to see what everybody else says, but I'm all in on that conversation.
If it built out like Legacy, I'd be very happy. 4 stories with a lot of Livermore charm.
55, yeah, that's 55.
Anybody else remembering our discussion? I thought what we talked about, yes, if we move to high density, there was a question whether it's even feasible. Yes, if we zone it to high density, it doesn't go high density. That's the market's choice. But and again, that's sort of the project team's recommendation. Are you recommending that we go with high density, or is medium high also an option since it's more realistic?
This map reflects what we thought the committee's direction was. So start with the blended alternative with the goal of increasing housing. And so this is our attempt to do that.
And would that work just as well with medium high?
Well, again, and we talked about this last time, the high density component we're really seeing for the first time at Isabel, and that's a station stop, a Valley Link station stop. We think those are the only types of areas where you probably have this catalyzing event that Brandon talked about last time that might make this use type feasible. In today's market, we probably would see the developer look to build it at the lowest end of the density range. Even so, in other parts of the community, we're really not seeing 60. It's only, it's only in these sort of catalyzing areas where we would see a developer have any interest in something at 60 units to the acre. And I think, again, today at least, you probably see folks try to go to the lowest end of the density range to begin with. Over time, it might, that density range might become more feasible. Market economics might change.
I think it's important also to remember that it just doesn't have to be a monolithic block either. And so given the wide range of densities, even within a given place type, 30 units to the acre is largely, I think, feasible, if not optimal from a developer's perspective today. 60 units, it would be much tougher, and you've only seen that downtown, as Paul mentioned. And north, yes, but it doesn't exist at Isabel yet, I guess is that. So we'll know in the next few years how feasible 60, 80, 100 units to the acre project is, because we do have that zoned at Isabel, and we do see activity from the development community there. So there's a little bit of a wait and see on the high density place type here. That said, if you have a medium density, you will likely see developers come in and say, I'm going to build at the lowest point of that density. So the other thing I'll mention that Andy brought up in our last meeting is that often in an area this large, you'll see a midtown area designation on the final general plan map, and then you'll have a specific plan. And we want to use this at least as an opportunity for you all to influence what the specific plan would be. So a description of your goals for the area and the place types in here that are consistent with your goals would be helpful, but probably won't end up translating exactly into the locations and land use designations that ultimately end up in the specific plan. So you can be maybe a little bit more free form here in terms of defining your objectives for the area, and think about percentages of things that you might want to see, knowing that it'll likely, ranges, knowing that it'll likely end up in a specific plan, because this is simply too large and complex of an area to not have a specific plan, more than likely.
There is a purple, I think it's purple line. So what you mentioned was a catalyzing feature, like the Valley Link station. As David mentions, the city is supportive of the Valley Link, even though we've had speakers against it. If that upper part were the high density and the rest of it were medium high, it seems to me like it would make a whole lot more sense. And so I'll just toss that out for people to think about.
I mean, just south of the purple line.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, this would remain high density. This is a mixed use corridor. It's actually a purple brown hatched corridor mixed, so that's urban high mixed use. And then you're saying committee member Burton, this would be urban high?
Medium high.
Medium high? Okay.
Out of curiosity and reference, what we removed from this map that's already been designated for development, like right on the eastern side of Las Positas. What is that place type currently? The housing.
Which one?
It's actually no longer existent.
This one?
Remember this stuff we talked about that was already designated for development? Yeah. Yeah, it was good. Just out of curiosity, when you start thinking about the bigger picture again, what was the already predetermined?
Which one?
So it's a single family neighborhood that's going going in.
This?
Single family?
The Arroyo Vista?
This combination.
Yeah. And then that's why it's kind of transitioning denser as it goes in for the core.
It's closer to the medium density. It's a mix of townhome types and single family homes.
And that neighborhood was planned through your last general plan update.
The neighborhood plan. It was identified as a transition area. This would be an area suitable for housing or convert to housing. And so it went through the process of a neighborhood plan, then an entitlement, and now it's being built.
In the medium density range. Okay.
So keeping that in mind, I think the transition that you would see here is from the medium density over to the west where Andy's cursor is, and you'd have a medium high density into currently a high density, but there's been a notion to change that to a medium high density, and then you have medium density down to the south of there on the other side of Las Positas.
But keep it high at the station.
Right. So you'd have high near the station, reducing in density as you move further away.
And in visualizing,
Block everyone's view of the highway.
that's fair. In visualizing the purple strip, I imagine that's a walkway with retail compatibility. Is that what that is? That's what. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Huh. So percentages is boring.
And again, through your specific plan, your final map will be much more nuanced.
Yeah.
And some of these blocks may move around, but telling us generally where you think certain types of land uses should be and the amounts of those land uses is the appropriate scale for today.
Any other comments? So I think we have, do we need to type this up? Is that okay? Just to say above the,
If we have a suggestion and a show of hands, then we'll type it.
okay, so the suggestion is above that candy stripe, which is not visible at the moment, above it is high density. Below it, similar to what's to its left, is gonna be medium high density with the school and the park intact. And show of hand if you think that's,
I'll second that.
oh, show of hand or?
Sure.
Oh, just show that.
Okay. Okay, we got it.
And just, I mean, we don't have the numbers, but that will dramatically drop the housing totals.
That will dramatically drop the house.
So the 16,000 population would go down quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the calculator
No, I
by,
know.
but yes, I mean, if you look at by volume, how much of that is high density housing, if you convert, I think, what is that, over 3/4 of it to a medium high density, you're likely to see a significant decline.
But it's also possible that since they were built to the lowest, about 60, what was the number?
I think it's low as 30 on that.
So it's really around there. You say even for high density, really it's not gonna go to the highest. It will be-
1,000 less units.
Yeah,
The estimates that we have are in the midpoint, so for residential high, the estimate's at 80, for medium
Okay.
high, the estimate is at 45.
so you actually use a midpoint, so you
Use a midpoint.
most feasible number. Okay.
The assumption is that some of it will build high and some of it will build low. Again, what we're seeing in the market today is mostly at the low end, but again, you don't know over time and what demand might occur around stationary.
And how much are we losing? Just follow your train of thought. How many units will we be losing?
Yeah, how many units total? 6,400. So 6,400, so we're at 8,000. Yeah. I suspect you're probably losing a couple thousand housing units.
Couple of thousand. Okay.
Is there any way, or I don't know how feasible it would be to more narrowly define something between medium high and high, like 50 to 70?
Yes, you can give us a new place type if you want. You don't have to be.
Or take a place type and say, but not below 45.
You can change the numbers if you'd like.
Right. And again, because this will likely go through a specific planning process, what we're really looking for you is what do you want to see happen here? And so if the medium high density place type includes a range that's too low for your taste because you don't want to lose that many units, we can take that note that the recommendation is the medium high density, except not below 40 units to the acre instead of down to 30, for example. So this one is going to experience more evolutions even than the other focus areas will. So tell us what your concerns might be, and we can design a system that will help to protect against that when it goes through a specific
Because I
process.
wouldn't want to lose that many housing units. Potentially, just general goal would be to keep it, high, closer to the station, and gradually transition towards the medium density. But to try, ideally 50 to 70. But
So we've got 6,364 housing units in this map. If there's a number that you want us to keep in terms of not falling below a certain number of housing units here, I think we could probably go back and talk to PlaceWorks and have them design the proportions that would change to meet what you're trying to do.
I would add too that we could try to do that with the map, just for the exercise to see if it would work. But the direction you just provided would be specific plan policy, that this is the amount we're trying to hit, and this is the way in which we want to try to hit it.
You know, it might not be an appropriate time, but before we made it more narrow, there were housing types outside the zone that we cut out from our design that could have supplemented some of them that we equalized here. We might want to noodle around that one for a bit. I mean, specifically, it was this, looking at the map, it was southeast from here. There was more areas that were zoned housing.
It's an excellent point. To also, related to that, bring up that this is just what's on the map, these numbers we're giving you. And there are areas here that we've seen, 10-acre parcel, at least one, another 5-acre parcel potentially, that are in a sort of potential development pipeline. This is maybe a good place to bring up what committee member Burnham has handed out in this piece of paper, which shows that this 8,370 housing unit outside the focus area, that number didn't change even as we moved things to be outside of this Midtown focus area. The reason is there are actually 3 buckets. There's not just change inside the focus area and change outside the focus area. Those are both sort of knowns. And then there's potential development where we've heard that people might want to change their land use. They've got some plans to do that, but we don't have anything certain yet. Either the underlying land use hasn't changed, we don't have a development application. And that's, we think, likely in the 1,000 to 1,500 unit count there. And that would include some of what Committee Member Strout was just referencing, which is areas outside this focus area map that still will likely see a land use change as part of the general plan update.
Thank you for that reminder.
And can you repeat if the land use change is leaning towards housing or industrial?
The land use change I was just describing?
Yeah.
Housing. So that's an additional likely 1,000 to 1,500 units, depending on how many of those actually come through for a land use change.
Okay, thank you.
Does that change your sentiment at all, Eddie? Modify it all? Or are you still kind of leaning on not so interested in losing that much housing?
Yeah, I would lean more on that side, but again, some of the specifics could be in the plan.
And that means keeping it high or keeping it medium high?
Well, definitely high at the top, closest to the station,
Right.
and then gradually transitioning towards that bottom, that's the medium.
Yeah. When you say transition, how would you designate that rainbow?
Well, just kind of general on the, like I said, they'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out.
But ideally, if there was a way to narrowly later on, 50 to 70.
But when you
Transition is
start-
a commonly used planning term.
Oh, thank
to
you.
go from one thing to another.
Sure. But would you start high or would you start medium high?
Yeah, well, just like we
I'm
all
sorry,
read, high
below,
at the very,
below.
below.
Below, would you start with medium high or high?
Depends what's possible to more narrowly define once they, do the specific plan.
So
Well,
there are two things you can think about today. One is changing the range for one of these place types, right? The second thing is to add more of another place type. So have a line be at a different point if you want it to be, to add more or less of a certain place type.
I was going to offer even a third approach, which, and then Brian will come up with 2 more as well. But change the map, and then with your direction of transitioning and giving us like a lower bound total, and we kind of know what the upper bound would be, so we can talk in ranges
What is the upper bound?
in terms of housing units. So go from high to urban high to medium, transition from the highest density to the lower densities
Okay.
as you move further away from the station, so long as the whole area maintains a range of X to the high end, which is 6,400
What is the
units.
goal of,
64.
what is the goal? So there's a sentiment of losing 2,000 unit being a little bit harsh, but what is the goal of that total housing unit in that transition?
That's it.
Okay.
And I do want to be careful. 2,000 units was a
I'm
very
sorry.
rough guess.
I'm
So
sorry.
don't hold to that. But I think what Andy is getting at is if you know you want to target a certain number of housing units, like you have right now, I lost it. Sorry. You have 6,364 units in this map. If you didn't want to drop below, say, 5,000 units, you could say, create a transition plan that looks at high density, something else, medium, high down below. You could take the medium, high density and you could cut it in half. And then the midpoint now becomes the low point of the upper range of that. And you know what I'm saying? So Yeah, I think there are ways we can do it. We just need to know what the boundary conditions are, is what Andy's saying. We know what the upper end of the housing unit range is. What's the lowest you'd want to go here? And then we can fiddle with the land use to create that for you.
Before you were talking, I was thinking 5,000.
Okay.
That's what I was going to
That's what I'm
suggest.
thinking too, 'cause that's a RENA cycle, so why not?
It's a good point.
Yeah, how many houses are there in the Isabel?
The total, 40, I think 4,100 net new was in the Isabel neighborhood plan. Is it 45 something?
Yeah, 40, just do the net.
Yeah, the net new in the Isabel neighborhood plan as written was 4,095 units.
So is the goal of 5,000 units, housing units with high density being what we'll just call north of the mixed use strip there, while maintaining some kind of medium high density gradient, all the way down towards what is medium density to achieve 5,000. Is that the kind of recommendation you're looking for?
It's exactly the kind of recommendation you're looking for, and it's consistent with how we planned the Isabel neighborhood as well, with the densest product at the core around the station area and then feathering out to transition to what is around it.
And just to recap, so the two sides of the concerns are the brand, the Livermore brand.
Yes, so yeah.
And then the other side is, really offering the transit-centric housing and also hopefully affordability. And so these are the two sides of the concerns.
I think you could add an extra element of feasibility into that.
And feasibility. Okay. Therefore, we kind of took a compromise of 5,000 while maintaining ideally accessibility of housing and keeping the brand. Is that enough?
Relative to that brand, like when we say high density team, let's just, like I said, north of that, do we want to put any parameters on that? Did I miss that? Are we suggesting high density could be like a 6-story high density? Do we want to be more specific in our recommendation? Because I'm not, high density makes sense to me.
Station's gonna be pretty tall.
I don't think we should make that recommendation. That's more of a PC council decision.
Okay.
We give them the blueprint. They can go from there.
So you brought up two words, feasibility and affordability. I will bring up again the point, you're talking about getting closer to an earthquake fault in a liquefaction zone, and you could build the Millennium Tower there, it will just not be affordable. And so if the goal is really to have houses that people can afford to build, you don't want to go to high density. That's the reality, in my opinion, here. And that's why the developer will want to develop at the low end, because he can actually develop housing that people can afford to buy. And I think that's the thing that everybody seems to be missing here.
So I hear you, Alan, but what is your suggestion relative to the map?
My suggestion is, you can leave the high density near the station. The station's not there, and if the station gets built, maybe it's feasible. If the station's never built, then you can reconsider lowering the density 5-10 years from now, whenever appropriate.
So are you more or less, and I'm just speaking. I'm fine with the general discussion. I was just concerned that people were concerned about losing too much housing. Quite frankly, I don't think the growth is going to be anywhere near the amount that people seem to be wanting to plan for. I see. Okay.
Well, we're starting in a hole though. I mean, we need to build more just to get out of the crisis. So.
It's self-fulfilling. If we don't build it, we won't get the growth. They're somewhat chicken and egg here. So it's just a planning for it. Whether it happens or not, we'll see. But I think we're planning.
So relative to my best attempt to summarize our conversation with that 5,000 gradient, does anybody have any modifications to my suggestion, assuming that's, like I said, the best simplification of what we're trying to achieve there? Or is that a good way to, or is that a good?
That's a good number.
Show hands.
Can we just, can I just hear myself? Can we just hear it again? So we say, yeah,
So I think you talked about a goal of about 5,000 units in the plan area, that you would have high density up near the station area, and that you would have a gradient down to medium density, as shown on the map, Andy, if you want to highlight it at the bottom edge of the map. So that whole middle section would sort of transition down in density
to
from
achieve.
high to medium.
That's Las Positas Road.
Yes, to Las Positas Road, correct.
Okay.
That's what we heard.
Is that bullet point that Debbie is editing for us? I want to make sure that
What
that
is urban?
tracks.
What is urban high?
Medium high, not urban high.
Oh,
Thank you. Yeah. High density near station transition, lower density from station change to medium high with a goal of 5,000. That,
I wouldn't say around that station.
That should work.
that's, yeah, I think that achieves it.
It'll get us through the arena.
Transition density down.
All right.
Up there.
We got
I
that.
think it's
And Andy, do you have the numbers on the jobs? The job creation in each corridor?
We do, so we have 6,994 jobs in this scenario. And that's mostly a function of transitioning that to that mixed industrial office product, which is a little bit denser in jobs.
So this would be the same type of product that is in most of East of Greenville.
Yeah, that's correct. And if you recall in our last conversation about it, it was trying to take advantage of the train station proximity to get some of those, higher innovation types of uses.
So could you clarify that? Because I was under the impression, maybe I was wrong, that most of these jobs were going to be clerks at stores that are going to serve this population, but you have a different idea.
Correct. So in the last meeting, when we talked about the transition to mixed industrial office, it was to take advantage of, and it's based on the conversation we had about other Tri-Valley transit stops where you see the work days and others built around the station area, that
Okay.
transit stations tend to be a catalytic kind of thing for those sorts of high quality jobs.
Okay, but that's in the purple part.
Yeah, and I think your recollection was about the previous map, which showed a lot of that pink color, which was a standard commercial, which would have had more of the job types you were.
Okay, so I think what confused me is I thought you were talking about the jobs within the brown area.
Yes, so,
Yeah,
so
okay.
that Main Street or the mixed use corridor there will certainly have some jobs. There'll be more service oriented jobs, retail, things like that. But I think the bulk of these jobs are coming from that mixed industrial office product.
Fine, I understand now, yeah.
So before we make a motion to approve this, just, clarifying question. So relative to the two bigger maps that we saw, one that includes east of Greenville, where do we stand currently on our recommendation to move some combination of that forward?
I think we should go through the rest of our details first.
Okay, so we're not there yet.
Once we
Okay.
get done with all.
Okay, then I'm in a good place.
you want to move?
I will motion to approve this map.
I'm ready, so I'm gonna second.
Motion in a second.
Okay.
Or with the change, right, to the meeting.
With the change to high density.
Okay, Committee Member Burnham,
Aye.
Committee Member Chiong,
Aye.
Committee Member Kent,
Aye.
Committee Member Kingsbury,
Aye.
Committee Member Revuelta,
Aye.
Committee Member Strout,
Aye.
Vice Chair Troupe-Masi,
Aye.
and Chairperson Shang.
Aye. Thank you, Debbie.
We lost Andy at an opportune time. So I don't know what he was proposing for this.
Well, so at this point, we're showing the map that has all of the focus areas that you've talked to us about today. We have the changes identified. We've gotten your votes on all of those. Again, you have two scenarios that the steering committee has asked us to look at. One of them is with east of Greenville, and the other one is without. And You have a discussion that you teed up earlier around this topic, and so this would be the time to continue that discussion.
So now we're at that point where
Yeah.
we decide which preferred.
Well, and I will just clarify, you do not need to make a decision tonight about whether to recommend with or without Greenville. The task tonight was simply to confirm what was on the map, that it was consistent with the direction. If it is the pleasure of the committee, we also can move the whole package forward for feedback and observation by the Planning Commission and the Council and bring their comments back to you. So you're not at a point where you have to decide to either keep it on or take it off.
We did hear quite a bit of discussion about needing additional information and needing analysis. That would be necessary really to make decisions. That was one of the other things we heard this evening. And the committee can discuss, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Is it possible for us to send the 3 western focus areas to the Planning Commission and say that GPAC wants to hang on to east of Greenville till we get more study?
It's at the pleasure of the committee. If you'd
It's
like to
all
say,
jobs over there. The housing's all on the other.
right, if you'd like to say we're not ready to forward you a recommendation on east of Greenville at this point, it needs more analysis, you certainly could do that.
But the other 3 could go forward.
They could, and I'll let Andy jump in here in just a minute. We do need, as we're working through our analysis, as we move into the rest of the general plan, we'll do traffic studies and lots of other things. We need to think about, do we just go ahead and proactively study that with and without, or what do we do? So that's one thing for us to think about. But you certainly could take that tact if you wanted to and say that we think this is not fully baked, it needs more analysis.
I think it still might make sense to let them see it, because if we want to do the analysis that you're asking for, ensuring that everyone knows what we're studying would probably be a good idea, considering that there have been significant changes since the last time that they saw it. So I think we can carry your comments, certainly, of these other 3, we've got more certainty on east of Greenville. General Plan Advisory Committee would like to continue to study this. There's more information that's needed. We can enumerate the information that you've talked about wanting to get to tonight and why it's important. And at least they would have seen all of it. Of course, they can come and review all the materials from this and see it themselves, but see it in a public setting in that same way. So it's, again, as Paul said, it's at your discretion, but there might be a path forward.
I think we have accomplished quite a bit, and we should be very proud to have something to send to the planning commission. But with the idea that we have reviewed our recommendations focus area by focus area, but in terms of choosing between scenario A versus B, that's not a decision that can really be done tonight. And would that be okay as something we send forward to the planning commission?
Yeah, it is, and if you'd like to further enumerate, and we can take notes and add any additional comments that you'd like to, that would be helpful. We've heard a lot of discussion, but we haven't heard any consensus around some of the additional things we'd like to look at.
Yeah, see, my concern is we've kind of hammered out the other 3 western areas, and you know, I think you see by the votes, you know, we've virtually achieved unanimity, not just consensus. A or B, if you send it forward and it's got an A or a B, meaning it's with or without, it gives the impression that, okay, now it's time for the Planning Commission to choose, but the reality will be, it's probably going to come out as alternate C, because after the data and the research is actually done, you know, I'd like to reserve the right to actually go in there and readjust the greenbelt and determine what can be viable farmland and what can't, and to make sure that I think some of Alan's comments about when you look at the topography map, some of the density numbers are probably unachievable in the north part of the light industrial, just because it's so hilly there. So I think, I don't think it's gonna be A or B. I think when the data comes in, it's gonna be C. And I would just hate to think that they feel the committee has done its job and they just voted up or down, when in fact, we haven't really been given enough data to make a recommendation. But I guarantee you right now, it will not be A and it will not be B. It will be something else.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar thought in that vein, only because I know there's a lot of effort that goes into your guys' time, specifically what I'm referring to, going in and making all this analysis and the cost of the city to contract with our partners to put together this additional info. I'm curious, and if this is a question to the committee and to the staff, if we can beg that question up by presenting them this information that we have and say, right now, the committee can really only commit to these three, but we would like to explore this further. But we don't want to explore it without like the PC and the council giving more clear direction for it. Because we can speculate all we want, but at the end of the day, there does need to be a vote by the populace to extend the UGB. And in order for that vote to happen, a proposition or a measure would need to be put on the ballot by the council to do so. And if the council is unwilling to do that, I feel like we'd be wasting time and resources exploring things further. I feel like we have enough general information for the council to give like an affirmative, yes, let's explore it further. Because I think we've gotten a lot of great information as a committee that was prepared for you guys and by our partners at PlaceWorks. But at the same time, we have a lot of stuff to cover for the GPAC, and at the end of the day, if their discretion is no, we're not going to put it on the ballot, we need to submit a general plan with only these three options. And I would much rather, if they're not going to give us some sort of guidance in that sense, that we want to put that measure on the ballot, then go forward with these three, and then move on to the next couple of topics so we can really start nailing in on some of that stuff that's kind of lagged behind, because this last process has taken 4-5 months, so we're a little behind the ball in terms of what we should be covering as a committee.
Yeah, I think those are good points. And I would just point out, for the sake of the conversation, that the only two options are not move forward with the general plan without East of Greenville, or go through an entire East of Greenville exercise. There's also, as Andy mentioned, I think in the last meeting, a number of other study area, transition area types of tools that you can use in terms of designating an area if you want to continue to study it. So just there are alternatives that are not quite so binary as we're going to go forward and do this right now. We're going to have to put all of that discussion and that investigation into that in preparation for a ballot measure, as you have pointed out, or we're taking it completely off the table. So there are things you can do, but I think good points.
Yeah, I'm not asking for EIR, that's right, it's a little overkill.
So, trying to just, clarify question relative to the, this A and B, Midtown with and without Greenville. Those truly only exist because we asked for them and you guys presented them to us, which my understanding was so that we could compare data and just get different looks at it. It's not now that five area plans exist. There's not Vasco, Laughlin up there, East of Greenville, Midtown, and Midtown with East of Greenville and Midtown without East of Greenville. I reckon this, they're still only going to get 4 focus areas, right? We're not pushing forward that A and B alternative that we asked for in a previous meeting. Does that make sense?
Correct. Your other 3 focus areas are set. You don't have alternatives that vary based on whether you're doing East of Greenville or not. Right?
So,
you've got 3 that are well locked in by the committee.
Is that completely confusing?
No.
What do you,
Right?
We should have 2 options basically for each.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you report this to the PC, to the Planning Commission, and eventually to the City Council, is it for them to approve, not approve, or what is it? Is it just to give them the feedback what we're doing here, right?
The intent is to provide them with an update. As Brandon pointed out earlier, it's been quite a bit of time since we've been back and report to council. We typically, through a process like this, would report 3 or 4 times a year, right? And so it's been a little while. We would update them on the maps that you've prepared and some of the other work that you've done. Of course, Planning Commission and Council obviously can weigh in on anything they'd like to as well. I'm throwing out a hypothetical. They might look at Laughlin, Planning Commission might look at Laughlin and say, the rest of it looks great, but we think the density is too high, or we think some other thing, and they have not been as involved as you are, but certainly they're also land use experts on the Planning Commission, so they may weigh in on a few things and have their own recommendations for council, and then council may just, there are a couple things they might do. They might just take the report and say thank you very much, or they might say thanks for the report, we'd like you to look at these extra things. There are a variety of things that council can do.
So when it gets to that point, where does GPAC roll?
So we're hoping after we've done the work on the maps to transition into some of the other items that the GPAC has on its agenda to talk about some of the other elements. We have circulation elements and safety elements and a variety of other components of the general plan we haven't even talked about yet. So we would like to walk through policy and then your team, based on the mapping, will do quite a bit of work behind the scenes. We can do additional work that the GPAC may ask us to do around jobs, housing, or other items to help you with future decision making. Any other things I'm leaving out?
The EIR is another big component where we would study, as Paul said, we'd analyze the maps, but the maps as you see them will also continue to evolve with GPAC's input. So I think Brandon mentioned earlier, these are place types. These are just placeholders for a concept. Ultimately, with the help of the committee, we refine them into the actual general plan, land use map. We define the designations and we make sure that they're the right fit. So some more fine tuning will have to go on.
So you as a project team, when the Planning Commission or the City Council make their inputs and say, and they can be specific, if they are specific on certain parts of the focus areas, do you do the changes in the same way as you apply it to GPAC?
No, we typically would take forward, if the Planning Commission had recommendations, those would be in writing, and we would have minutes from the commission meeting and staff would summarize. Planning Commission took in this report, received the report, and provided the following feedback. So all of your feedback stands on its own. Planning Commission has their own opportunity to provide additional comments or feedback. That we wouldn't change the maps at that point, but we would write them all down as comments, and then we would forward that package to the council.
And Andy whispered to me, and he's absolutely right, that the council has not had the benefit of seeing any of the public engagement outcomes either. So while you all have had the benefit of the workshop outreach, feedback and hearing from the community that way, the PC and the council have not. So in addition to the changes to the maps, it's important for us to keep them in the loop and allow them to provide us with information that can be provided back to you. So as you continue down this path, we don't sort of trudge along in a vacuum without any input from the other folks who also have perhaps a different perspective or would like additional areas of study. They might want to look at what's the fiscal impact of something like East of Greenville in terms of financial returns it can produce for the city, or other types of things.
So I guess I would like to ask a question in terms of deadlines, because the earliest possible time to have a result of a vote on East of Greenville would be 2.5 years from now, I think. Maybe not. And when is a general plan supposed to be adopted? And is there a way to actually have a clear public decision on that before you have to finalize your general plan? The other three can go forward. I mean, they're qualitatively different in terms of the kinds of things that are going to happen.
The anticipated adoption date for the general plan right now is spring, early summer of 2025.
So I guess I would say that there is really no way that the East of Greenville is going to be in a state that could be put in the general plan other than a qualitative section saying this is being studied?
As Brandon mentioned, that is one of the options. There's several options before you.
Right? Once you identify an east of Greenville that the council wanted to move forward, we would need to then do environmental analysis on that east of Greenville final map in order to have it go to the ballot. And so, at this point, we don't have time left to do that in 2024. You would look out to some future year, most likely, if you wanted to have a vote on that.
In other words, it would be a general plan amendment after the next general plan is adopted. Am I understanding the timelines correctly?
There are a couple of options there. That is one of them, that you would have this as a future focus or study area, and it could be incorporated into the general plan if the community so voted, right? That's one option. It could be a future study area that is triggered based on certain conditions that happen in the future. Or the council could pick a certain election and ask it to happen there at that election and defer the approval of the general plan until all of those things happen. So are there other options you can think of?
No, I would just say, because I think it's important for the committee to know that a number of things are waiting on the general plan to be adopted, not least of which are the property owners who own property in the focus areas who are waiting to see what will happen with that property, but also other important documents like fee study updates and things like that. So it is important that we move through general plan adoption in a timely manner. So your points about the sequencing of these things are important to bring up.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the crux of what I was getting at too. It's like, what can we actually move forward with this general plan realistically, and actually have like, hey, this is the seal of approval on the general plan. With that being said, with the last that you just mentioned, with there being additional options like having this be an amendment sitting on the sideline saying if they actually go forward with, then this gets pulled in for additional study. I actually wouldn't be against moving forward with that as what the committee recommends. Because with all that being said, I don't think we need to worry about like how straight that line is between the greenbelt and the industrial at this current moment, or if it matches perfectly with the hill topography, because there would be additional study going on in the future, and to Alan's point, possibly 2 years from now. And that kind of goes back to my point where like, how much time do we actually want to spend on like getting into the nitty gritty of this one, when we can say, put this in the appendix saying that if the future council does want to put a ballot measure up to extend the UGB out, then this would get pulled in. And the PC and the council can put their comments in on what we present them in terms of what's a general draft of what this could be, and that's their prerogative. But from a committee standpoint, I am comfortable with that kind of structure of what we get sent to PC and up to kind of, so to speak, put a needle in the topic, and so we can move forward with the rest of our general plan stuff that we desperately need to get to.
So to be clear, the reason I voted against the other one, when I was the only one, was I was unclear about what the definition of moving forward meant.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I didn't think that this was a reasonable, plausible thing to say, okay, this is kind of where we are now. It was the moving forward. I didn't know what I was committing to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm there with you, which was kind of why I started the meeting with like, what happens next after this? Feedback loop is what I heard comes back to us with PC and like a whole lot more recommendations. So I'm with Asa. I'm comfortable with this. I think this reflects the conversations we've been having. Yeah.
Okay.
So what do you?
Okay, so can we type this up so we can? So we all feel we can say we're comfortable with the 3 focus areas, and the fact that we had voted today as far as if the East of Greenville place types match, or at least really agree with what the committee discussed and recommended. And that's what we voted on. We did vote just now, just to remind everyone that, yes, thank you, Alan, with the exception that what does that mean? We voted on the map really as a result of our discussions. I didn't really hear the word moving forward. I just remember voting that it's in agreement with what we discussed.
Yeah.
It's a snapshot. There's no moving forward. It's just agreement of the discussion. So I'm personally comfortable with what we agreed on. But whether or not we move forward, that has a lot of factors. There are unresolved requests that will take a long time to come back. And so can we type this up to say that there are certain content we feel comfortable sending forward with what you describe as comments and context?
So, or what I'm hearing as subtext perhaps is that there are 3 areas that you're comfortable with and 1 area that requires additional study. Is that?
So it seemed like committee member Strout had a specific recommendation he wanted to make, but I wasn't entirely clear on what it was and how we could capture it for you.
Yeah, it was less doing additional study and more just saying if we're comfortable with, because we just kind of all agreed with the slide, if we're comfortable with that slide, putting that in like the appendix and of the general plan so that in the future, 2 years out-ish, if there is a ballot measure that the citizens of Livermore do vote yes on, like that's kind of like the framework that would be used for the planning in the future during a future general plan amendment.
So a future study area?
Yes, like, yeah, we don't need to, I don't think we need to spend more time studying that specific plot.
That's a different, now I thank you for clarifying that. That, to me, is a different level of commitment. I think we really only committed to the fact that this map was a result of our discussion. But to table East Greenville, are we talking about tabling it?
Perfect. Well, I would say we're good here, and then what can actually be put in the general plan would be those 3 sections, and like the official, like, hey, this is what's going to go forward. Well, this one, because we literally can't action it until there's a vote.
I'm just trying to understand so is that similar to what David was saying, you're going to table it? I'm just trying to...
Maybe not the right language.
Okay.
But it's like, what can we commit to today? What can we commit to by the deadline for the GPAC adoption? It's 3 areas right now.
Correct. Yeah.
What we can make a recommendation and have it kind of like sitting on the side is like we have preliminary studies for this area that if the council were to agree to put a ballot measure out to extend the UGB, that this is kind of the framework that they can use for zoning if the citizens would more vote yes.
Personally, I don't hesitate to take a position. I see what you're saying, thank you so much. I don't hesitate to take a position to say whether this committee is willing to recommend further study. Again, that's not tabling it, because that's like, okay, let's just put a stop, there's a pause. And I a little bit vague from what Asa is saying, but personally, I don't hesitate to have a recommendation to the planning commission whether we should put forward a study in order to achieve certain goals. Do we still have those goals? In order to meet those goals, do we need to put forward certain study of the East Greenville? So this is a very opposite of what David is recommending.
Well, perhaps there's a middle ground there. Maybe we send all 4 areas so they know what we're working on, and just say that East of Greenville is subject to change. The recommendations of GPAC are subject to change when the additional information that's in process becomes available. If not, you're going to end up in a binary choice between A and B, and not many people attend these meetings. They're not well reported. They're going to think that it came out with the same level of certainty that Midtown and Vasco Row came out, and it just isn't there. I think I think we need to get the information and the plan that we've laid out, which we agree that reflects our thinking, but we don't have enough data yet to actually make that. So I just say if that one's clearly marked as subject to change when the information comes, so that, you know, battle lines aren't drawn over it at this point till all the data is available.
Okay, so, yeah.
Because I've never been one of those people who says, don't think about it, don't study it, don't look at it. That's just not, that's not doing our job as a GPAC.
Thank you.
But we need more study before we have a high level of confidence that we're sending forward the right plan.
I think to me it's clear what the staff said about just giving a report. That's my understanding, essentially giving a report on what, you know, an update on what GPAC has been doing. I think if we leave out the east of Greenville, I would be disappointed because we've been spending a lot of time on it. If we don't report back to them this area, then what were we here for? You know, spending all these meetings about the east of Greenville, but they're not doing any decision making. We're not doing any UGB decision making, voting or not voting at this point. But I think just clearly from staff is just giving them an opinion.
So let me summarize. So subject to change with East of Greenville as a result of our discussion, we spend a lot of time. We should include that discussion and the map. Asa, can you clarify if that is contrary to what you are proposing? Would you like to clarify or supplement?
No, I think that should be fine. I think it's mostly that, you know, it can be kind of like, I'm trying to move forward past this, I guess, maybe a little bit quicker than some people. Because, you know, I'm trying to be, like, aware of the time being spent by staff. If we were to do more studies, if we say, like, hey, this could change depending on additional info, we're basically asking for more info now.
Yeah, we're happy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just kind of saying, like, hey, if they want to, at some point in the future, like, you know, I think we have a fair amount of information to say, like, to give the council the direction to say, should we do a ballot measure, yes or no? I feel like they have that information, and then if we get the yes, great. Now we actually have the time to do the study, and then we can start building that study out of additional details once we actually know the council is on board with that kind of ballot measure. Because the fact of the matter is the council can never be on board, and then all the work you're asking the staff and our partners to do is shovelware.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's kind of my perspective on this stuff. And again, in the nature of moving forward towards our deadline. But if it does go in there that there's, you know, a little asterisk next to it, like Barry Ponce's home right record, that's fine with me. Because I just want to emphasize that there are 3 things on here that can and should and hopefully will be in the general plan once it's adopted.
Yeah.
We just have one section that needs a more affirmative support by people who are elected in the city to say they want to move forward with that.
Gotcha.
So could I the thing that I'm uncomfortable with, what Asa says, is that this map should be the basis of a ballot measure.
That's not what I said.
Well,
It sounded like
it
that.
sounded like it.
I said it could be like a framework with the zoning that once it does get passed, that's what they can start as their framework. That's not saying that, like, that's saying it's final.
Oh, no, I understand. I understand that, but I'm thinking about what's going to show up in the newspaper, and I think anything that would suggest that this committee thinks that this is the basis of a ballot measure is not a good idea.
One, that's not what I said.
Well,
and
I
two,
understand.
typically I don't worry about what other people say about my opinions if I firmly believe in them.
So thank you for the clarification. I think it's often true that we get different reactions. So that's given that. Let me just again do a quick time check. We're doing really well. It's about a little bit past 9, and I think we have seems to me a consensus that we will recommend that the project team move forward with the 3 focus areas as we had discussed, really as a representation of what we had discussed. This committee has no really decision-making power, but we appreciate the opportunity to give recommendations. So the 3 focus areas is pretty clear. And the 4th one, East of Greenville, we have 2 possible caveats. Just this, one is that really the map does not represent what we think the ballot measure should have. It's a result. Again, let me repeat clearly. It's a result of our discussion, nothing more. And we recommend that further study will be done, and this map will be subject to change. And we also will appreciate if the council, City Council Planning Commission can also give us some feedback whether they may or may not be inclined to move forward with the ballot measure, etc. Again, we're just curious about the feedback. If they have a negative direction, then we can table this. So that kind of feedback is helpful. Does that make sense, what I said?
It does. We're not really at a decision point necessarily for council, and they may be reluctant to give you a decision without your recommendation. So I don't know that I would recommend asking them to make a decision at this point necessarily. But I have heard a couple of options on the table. One is that we're focusing on 3 areas specifically. Those are the areas that we would study robustly through the general plan. The other area requires additional analysis. We've heard quite a few of the things that the committee's interested in. We could go back and sort of on a parallel path while we're doing the policy analysis and other things. We can do some of that in the background. It may take some time, but we can bring back some of that information that David has mentioned, and the committee can then refine its recommendation in the future. This is something that you would share with Planning Commission and Council.
That sounds great.
But that's one option. The other is to say that these are the maps, and this is the East of Greenville map that we have prepared. And Ace, I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, but that this would be the basis potentially for a future vote or for future analysis.
Well, that's
Future
not.
analysis is better than future vote.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
future
thank you.
analysis.
I'm kind of liking option 1 that you mentioned, but I don't know where
I'm just trying to repeat what I think I heard. So correct me if I get it wrong.
The first one sounded more clear to me.
Another suggestion to add to option 1 is, let's take a look at what the city would look like just with the 3, and say, is that what we want? Does that represent a good outcome at that point? Without East of Greenville, just do we like these 3 plus existing plus anticipated, and does that get us to the point of comfort? Is that a good landing point?
Yeah.
Because to me, if it is, then Greenville can be deferred.
Can you be sure to remind us to do that, Tim? Because I think today we just really wanted to have some consensus as far as reporting to the.
No, I'm just saying that's part of
right,
the future.
But we definitely want to come back and say without Greenville, is that something we want to see? And that will take further deliberation because that it's not gonna, I would like to give us more time to discuss what Tim just said. So I'm gonna separate, as far as reporting out versus what else we need to discuss.
And I think you would get some of that through the parallel analysis I was talking about. We would do work on the 3 sort of along one path, and you'd get some of that look to see what that would look like as a standalone piece. And then at the same time, we would be analyzing all of the data that we've been asked to look at around East of Greenville, and the committee potentially would have the opportunity to come back and refine it or adjust it or do whatever it thought was most appropriate.
Yeah, so option 1, Paul, of what you said, with the, I don't know if that has any weight or not, whether it goes anywhere, that we are not ready to choose between A and B. And we hope that the Planning Commission will not take that step lightly either.
what is needed next procedurally from us?
So we'd like to work towards a vote from the committee itself and a recommendation. Again, what I've heard so far is that the three focus areas would be moved forward as a recommendation to Planning Commission and Council. East of Greenville is too early to tell. The committee needs to do additional analysis. The committee has given us, and we've taken notes today, a number of things that you all would like to look at to better inform your analysis of this area and to inform a future recommendation.
I'll move that forward.
I'll second it.
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry, can I add that we're not making a choice between A and B? I really want to make it very, very clear.
Yes, you are not making a recommendation on East of Greenville to pursue it or not pursue it. You're saying that this area requires significant additional analysis.
So, okay, is that okay? Do we need to read?
No, I would, no, I'm ready.
It's ready for a vote.
Okay.
It's been seconded.
Okay, Debbie, we ready for a vote?
Yeah, just so I'm
clear for the record, the motion is to move forward with the three focus areas, not east of Greenville until we have more information. Is that correct? I mean,
Not exactly.
No, I hold on a second. It's being recorded, I know.
Yeah.
Let's just-
Well, I mean, while you're looking that up, but this is, I mean, this is why we're here. But like backtracking, like when this slide first came up, I think Brandon did a good job of summarizing our initial recommendation, which was it's time for the PC and City Council to throw their eyes on this. There's three focus areas that we feel significantly better about. Otherwise, we feel that East of Greenville reflects the conversation with the very specific bullet points, that Dave made and we've made throughout, particularly tonight, that will be shared with the Planning Commission and City Council to keep in mind in their deliberation.
Yes.
Is that, I mean, that's like.
Again, I'll look to repeat it one more time, but yes, I think that's correct, and that's a part of it. You've done work on three focus areas that you're ready to move forward as a recommendation with your map. Those are Laughlin, Vasco, and Midtown. East of Greenville requires significant additional analysis. The map that you've prepared reflects the committee's work to date and their thoughts to date, but we do have a listing of the additional factors that you'd like to consider as you evaluate East of Greenville, and the committee would like to have the time and to be able to direct the staff to do that analysis and have future consideration.
That's what.
Yeah,
And that's what I think I heard.
I'll revise my motion to be exactly.
Okay.
Yes, I'm fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's do it.
okay, Committee Member Burnham,
Aye.
Committee Member Chiong,
Aye.
Committee Member Kent,
Aye.
Committee Member Kingsbury,
Aye.
Committee Member Revuelta,
Aye.
Committee Member Strout,
Aye.
Vice Chair Troupe-Masi,
Aye.
and Chairperson Shang.
Aye, thank you so much, Debbie. So with that, I have a procedural question. Does that close 4.2 or is that a continuation?
It's close.
Just close it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm okay either way. Okay, with that, I close.
Closed and congratulations.
Congratulations, we have done quite a bit, and I'm really glad to get the Planning Commission and Council to take a look. So with that, we gonna adjourn the meeting? Do I need to vote? No, okay. And our next regular meeting will be on April 10th. Is that right, Debbie? Okay, thank you all. We did it, efficient, 9:19.
Okay.
I was prepared for 11 o'clock.
No, we got there.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well done, team. Well done,
I
team.
know. I think